Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about energy movement and ecosystems. We're going to start talking about it. um, so I just want you to look at this picture real quick, and we have a bunch of different forms of energy in this picture. A couple important ones that we're going to talk about are chemical energy. So like the energy in the food that we eat, right? Our food is basically just chemicals. And then we also have light energy, okay? And those are going to be important right now because we're going to talk about photosynthesis today. You've probably heard that power or energy can't be created or it can be destroyed, but it can be transferred from one form to another. Like this is an example. Okay, so a light bulb needs electricity, right? And so there's a bunch of different um, forms of energy that we can transform into electric energy in order to make the light bulb work. For example, bam, solar, right? Light energy, hydropower, like from a dam. Wind, we could turn a turbine, right? Those big old fans. And then we could also have geothermal energy, which is like heat from the earth that we could transform into electric energy. So the key here, remember, we're going to write down anything that's in red or any like titles that we need. Hold on. So this is important here. Energy can be converted from one form to another. Okay, so a couple new vocab words here. So we got autotroph and we got heterotroph. And so I want to break these words down. Auto means self and troph means energy. So self energy basically is saying this thing makes its own energy, okay? And so this obviously is going to be a plant. And it doesn't just magically create its own energy, it uses the sunlight in order to turn, well, we're going to get into this, but it's going to turn CO2 into sugar, okay? So it uses sunlight as a source of energy in order to do that. Heterotroph, hetero means different, okay? So here we have different energy. So it cannot use itself to make its own energy. It has to eat something, essentially. So another word for both of these things, an autotroph is a producer, and a heterotroph, if you can guess this, consumer, right? That's how we get our energy. So let's write some things down for this. So this blank can produce their own energy. Well, you would write this down and fill in this blank. So an autotroph or a producer. I want you to know both of those words. And on the other hand, okay, blank must eat food for energy. Well, that would be a heterotroph or a consumer. Okay. Now, I put these pictures here because obviously this is a plant, so they can do photosynthesis. So they are an autotroph. Plants are producers. If we tried to do photosynthesis when we go out in the sun, we just get a sunburn. So we cannot get our energy from the sun, which would maybe be cool, but maybe it would just be all green too. So we'll also talk about what makes plants green, which is their chloroplasts. Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper into this whole idea of autotrophs and heterotrophs. And so these pictures right here are organelles, which are, if you guys remember, organelles are tiny little organs inside of cells. Okay, so just like our whole body has organs, like your heart and your lungs and your liver, which do specific jobs, these are organelles which do specific jobs inside of each cell. And so this green one, this is called a chloroplast. So we should write that. And maybe hold off on writing that. So that's called a chloroplast. And this one everyone knows, the famous mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, anyway, so both of these are energy gathering organelles, basically, that help us live. Okay, well, we don't have chloroplasts, but it helps plants live. So let's make a little T-chart here. Oops. Make a T-chart, and it's going to have photosynthesis on one side. So actually, I didn't do the T, so let's do it like this. Line down the middle. So on one hand, photosynthesis, this is what plants do. And, right, so it occurs only in plants. And then sunlight is used to convert CO2 into sugar. So this CO2 is like the raw materials, and we are going to take that and turn it into sugar. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later too, but my analogy I like to use is the CO2 is like the cake mix, and the sugar is like the cake. So we are going to take the raw ingredients and turn it into a cake. Okay, so CO2 into sugar, and sunlight is used to do that. Sunlight is like the oven, right? Now, they make their own sugar, but what do we do with that sugar after? We still have to break that, or the plants still have to break the sugar down to be able to use it. Okay, that's where the mitochondria come in. Okay, and mitochondria do a process called cell respiration. Okay, so respiration, you might think of breathing, and it's kind of related, but cell respiration is going to be more specific than this. Cell respiration is when we make energy from sugar. So let's write some things down. Again, happens in both plants and animals now. So obviously, animals like us, like humans are animals, we have mitochondria. We eat, let's say, a Snickers bar, and the sugar goes into the mitochondria and all of your cells, and the mitochondria breaks it down. So food, it's breaking down glucose. So we're breaking down that sugar from the Snickers bar and turns it into something called ATP. Another real quick analogy is this. So glucose is like having a $1,000 bill. Okay. Now, this is not very practical. It's too big. You can't go to Walmart and buy a pack of gum with $1,000 bill. They're going to be like, no, you need some ones or something. So you go to the bank and you break it down and you have 1,000 ones. And now you can buy your pack of gum. And so a $1 bill, this is like ATP. This is what the cell can actually use. So we need mitochondria to turn our $1,000 bills into $1 bills so that we can actually use it in the cell. The cell can't use a whole glucose molecule because it's too big, too bulky. It's not very usable. It's not practical. Okay. So back to my thing about plants. Plants need both a chloroplast to make the sugar, and then they need a mitochondria to break the sugar down. Okay. So they can make their own sugar, and then they just break it down themselves with the mitochondria. Okay, us humans, animals don't have chloroplast, so they have to eat their sugar, and then they just use the mitochondria to break it down into ATP, so that they can use the ATP to do all the things that the cell needs to do. And the cell's doing hundreds of things every second that it needs ATP for. Okay, so that's an important point there. Okay, guys. So let's move on. All right. Again, you can fill this out. I'm not going to fill this out for you. Photosynthesis is how two words, one starts with an A, one starts with a P, both mean the same thing. How both of those things get sugar. Fill those in. Now, you guys are going to have to know this equation. Okay, it seems kind of confusing, but I'll explain in a bit why it's not that hard to remember. Okay, and so let me just go over it. So we need CO2. We need, in fact, 6 CO2s, and we need 6 water molecules, right? CO2 is carbon dioxide. And then we're going to make 1 sugar molecule. So this is glucose. This is the thing. This is the sugar that we're talking about, right? Is glucose. That's the name of the sugar. And then we also make oxygen. Okay. Glucose is the whole goal. Making glucose is the goal of this photosynthesis equation. Oh, I don't know if I said that. Sorry. This is the equation for photosynthesis. Maybe write this. Photosynthesis equation. Oops, that's a Q. Equation, and then write down the equation. Okay. So photosynthesis equation. So the whole goal of this photosynthesis is to make glucose. Oxygen, on the other hand, is just released from the plant's leaves as a byproduct. Okay, so we'll say it's a byproduct. It's not actually needed. Just like when you guys are doing cell respiration, when we are doing respiration to make that ATP, we're going to make CO2, and we just breathe out the CO2, and we don't need that. Okay, don't worry about that yet. Okay, so again, I want to go back to that analogy. So look, this is glucose. It has 6 carbons. Okay, so where do you think it gets those 6 carbons? Well, look, 6 CO2s go into making this glucose. Okay, so again, I'll give that analogy of these things over here. the CO2 and the water, they're like the cake mix. And then the products over here, the glucose, this is like the cake. This is the whole goal. We can't turn cake mix into cake without having an energy source, right? So you need to put your cake mix in the oven, and then it will turn into cake. It will do the chemical reactions to turn into cake. So we can't do this without the sunlight, okay? So our sunlight is going to be like the oven, and without that, your CO2 would never be able to be turned into glucose. That's what the sunlight is for, okay? That's why the plants need the sunlight. Okay, so I think that's where we're going to end today. Let me know if you have any questions, okay? Thanks.